quiet home in Kansas. A father. A husband. A trusted pastor. But in the early hours of September 16, 2023, something happened that no one could have predicted. At 3:30 a.m., a panicked, breathless child called 911. "My dad is chasing us with a knife." Minutes later, another call. This time his wife pleading for help. When first responders arrived, they were met with a scene straight out of a nightmare. A house engulfed in flames, a family in crisis, and inside, an unconscious man, the weight of his actions still unknown. How did it come to this? How did a man once seen as a pillar of his community become the center of a case no one expected? This is the story of Matthew Lee Richards. A tale of hidden struggles, irreversible choices, and a night that changed everything. But before we begin, I just want to take a moment to say thank you to all of you. Your likes, comments, and shares help bring these stories to a wider audience. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to Crime Chronicles and join our growing community of true crime enthusiasts. Now let's dive in. Shawnee, Kansas, a suburb just outside of Kansas City, is considered one of the safer areas, with a violent crime rate of 1.7 per 1,000 residents, much lower than the state average. It's a place where families settle down, expecting safety and stability. But on September 16, 2023, that sense of security was shattered. The first call came at exactly 3:30 a.m. A child's voice, frantic and gasping for air, reached the dispatcher, who barely had time to process the words before another call came through. This time it was an adult, her voice strained and trembling. "I've been hurt. We need help." Then a third call. A neighbor, still half asleep, reported something different. "There's smoke coming from the Richards house, and I think I just heard something explode." A possible fire, a violent disturbance, and now an explosion. First responders knew they had to act fast. Within minutes, emergency vehicles cut through the quiet Kansas streets, sirens piercing the night. They pulled up to the house, headlights flashing across the front yard. That's when they saw them. A woman and two children stood barefoot on the damp grass, their hands shaking, their faces frozen in shock. Their clothes were soaked in blood. Medics rushed in, quickly assessing the injuries. The family members had noticeable wounds, signs of struggle. One child, holding their stomach, appeared weak, trying to stay upright. Then, boom, a sudden explosion from inside the home. Firefighters were quick to respond, and within moments, the crew discovered Richards inside the house, unconscious and struggling to breathe due to smoke inhalation. Inside the ambulance, the medical team worked urgently. The first child had a deep abdominal wound. The second child had multiple lacerations on their arms and hands, wounds that told a story of someone trying to protect themselves. Then there was the woman, Richard's wife. She was barely conscious, in critical condition. Her injuries suggested something important. She had fought back. But beyond the wounds, beyond the smoke and fire, there was something even more unsettling. It wasn't just what had happened inside that house. It was who had done it. Her husband. Their father. The man they trusted. Officers moved carefully through the house, using flashlights to navigate through the thick smoke. They needed to secure the scene. Near the entrance, they found a kitchen knife lying on the floor, the handle stained red. They continued searching. The living room, though untouched by the fire, raised questions. The fire had started in the basement, and its rapid spread didn't look accidental. This wasn't just a house fire, it seemed intended to destroy everything. Once Richards regained consciousness, still restrained, officers began piecing the situation together. One officer approached the lead detective. "You need to see this," he said. In the hallway they found a can of lighter fluid and, nearby, another knife still in the sink. It quickly became clear, the fire had been deliberately set. The goal was to erase evidence. However, Matthew Lee Richards appeared, on the surface, to be the epitome of what people aspire to be in their community. He was 43 years old, married to Stephanie Richards since 2003, and together they raised 5 children, 4 boys and 1 girl. A family man in every sense of the word, or at least that's how it seemed to everyone around him. For 7 years he was a children's pastor at Crossroads Christian Church, guiding young minds, fostering growth, and spreading messages of faith. He also taught 7th grade English at Christ Preparatory Academy in nearby Lenexa, Kansas. By all accounts, Matthew was well-liked, respected, and a role model for both his church community and his students. In Shawnee, he and his family were seen as the kind of people you'd expect to see at the center of everything. Attending church on Sundays, volunteering, helping neighbors. They were exactly the kind of family that made you feel like life in this small Kansas suburb was safe and stable. But that stability didn't last. Because behind closed doors, things were not as perfect as they appeared. The Richards family had always prided themselves on their strong values and unity, but privately, Matthew was hiding something that had been eating away at him for months. The truth was they were on the brink of losing everything. The financial troubles that Matthew had kept from his wife and children had begun to spiral out of control. In August 2023, the final eviction notice arrived. The Richards family was about to be evicted from their home. But Matthew never told Stephanie. He kept everything to himself, pretending everything was fine while the walls of their financial struggles closed in on him. Matthew's inability to share this burden with his family led him to a place where the pressure became unbearable. He formulated a plan. In the days leading up to the attack the night before, on September 15, 2023, he decided to take matters into his own hands. He felt trapped, cornered by debt, eviction, and the weight of his secrets. Later, in a statement to police, Matthew would say, "I thought it would be better if we all just left together." But what did he mean by that? Why did he believe this was the only solution? And why did he feel that his family, his wife and children, would be better off in the way he had planned? As the days went on, those closest to Matthew began to notice subtle but disturbing changes in his behavior. Coworkers at the church and school observed his withdrawal. He was no longer the energetic, engaged leader they had known. Instead, he seemed distant. Stress lines showed on his face. He avoided conversations and seemed to have trouble connecting with those around him. And then there were the neighbors. They had always known Matthew to be polite, the kind of person who'd wave from his driveway or stop for a quick chat while picking up groceries. But recently, something had felt off. They couldn't put their finger on it, but there was a noticeable shift in his demeanor. He wasn't the same man they had once seen regularly involved in community events. Something had changed and no one seemed to know why. These signs, small as they seemed at the time, were all part of the unraveling of a man who had been silently struggling with more than just financial problems. His emotional and psychological state was deteriorating, but it was a battle that no one could see, until it was too late. Matthew's struggle with mental health, his financial pressures, and his increasing isolation would all come to a head on the night of September 16, 2023. His psychological decline, unnoticed by those around him, led him to make a choice that none of his loved ones would ever understand. After being transported to the hospital and treated for smoke inhalation, Matthew Richards was finally able to speak. Once he was cleared, he was placed in an interrogation room at the Shawnee police station. "Why did you do this?" the investigator asked, his voice steady, trying to get to the heart of what had led to such a violent act. Richards sat there for a moment, his eyes lowered as he seemed to reflect on the question. Finally, he spoke, his voice low, almost regretful. "I didn't want them to suffer." His answer, though simple, left more questions than answers. What had he meant by this? How did this fit into the violence that unfolded in his home? But as the investigation deepened, investigators began to piece together a clearer picture of what had happened leading up to the night of the attack. The first major clue came from bank records. They revealed that, for several months, Matthew had fallen behind on rent. The final eviction notice had arrived just days before the attack, yet he had told no one in the family about their looming financial troubles. In fact, Stephanie and the children had no idea they were at risk of losing their home. The records were stark. A man carrying a weight of debt but trying to shield his family from the truth. But the real breakthrough came from the survivor statements. One of the children who had managed to escape told police what had happened that night. "We were asleep when Dad started hurting us. We ran outside." The child's statement provided key insight into what had happened inside the house, but it still didn't explain the why. Finally, when investigators returned to question Richards about the details of the night, he offered more insight into his actions. This time his confession was more complete. He explained that he had set the fire first to cover up everything. "I set the fire first, then I grabbed the knife," he admitted. The disturbing part of his statement came next. "I remember flashes. I felt like a monster." His admission spoke volumes. He knew what he had done, and in that moment he seemed to be grappling with the reality of his actions. But there was one more detail he revealed that struck a deeper chord. "I didn't want them to feel the pain of losing our home." Richard said he didn't want his family to have to deal with the shame and trauma of eviction. In his mind, the only way to protect them from that pain was to make a decision that would forever change the course of their lives. As the investigation into Matthew Richards' actions continued, the legal consequences were set to unfold. Initially, Richards faced 4 counts of attempted first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted capital offense, and 1 count of aggravated arson. The severity of the charges reflected the gravity of the situation, an attempted attack on his entire family and an intentional fire meant to destroy evidence. But as the legal process moved forward, Richards took a step towards a plea deal. On February 11, 2025, he pleaded guilty to 2 counts of attempted first-degree offense. This decision marked a shift in the legal proceedings, and his sentencing date was set for March 26, 2025. With the plea deal in place, the court now turned its attention to determining the appropriate consequences for his actions. Actions that had shattered not just his own family but the community that had trusted him. This case raises difficult questions. Questions that linger in the minds of many. How can someone hide such immense financial stress from those closest to them? How does a family, seemingly unaware of the turmoil behind closed doors, miss the warning signs of a person's psychological decline? For the Richards family, the road to recovery will be long. They have survived an unimaginable ordeal, but the emotional and physical scars will take time to heal. Their journey will be marked by struggles and triumphs as they attempt to rebuild their lives after a night that no one could have predicted. But in the aftermath of the attack, the community was left reeling. Crossroads Christian Church, where Matthew Richards had served as a beloved children's pastor for 7 years, was left in shock. The church, which had always been a place of support and strength, found itself trying to make sense of a tragedy that seemed beyond comprehension. The church's statement expressed the disbelief and sadness felt by everyone who knew Matthew and his family. Read. The Crossroads Christian Church family is shocked, sickened, and saddened by the events involving our former children's pastor. This is a tragedy beyond what any of us could have imagined. We give our full cooperation and support to the Shawnee Police Department and the Johnson County Sheriff's Department as they conduct their investigation. They continued, offering their support for both the immediate victims and the extended Richards family. We are offering support and resources to the members of the Richards family who are victimized and their extended family. The road to recovery will be long, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Please respect their privacy as they walk this incredibly challenging and painful road. Please join us as we continue to pray for and stand with them. The church also pledged to help with the emotional toll the incident had taken on the community, and especially the children. We also ask for your respect and prayers for the many children and families affected by this incident. We are all grieving with our dear friends who are deeply hurting in so many ways. Crossroads Christian Church will offer grief counseling for children and families in the coming days and weeks. Pastor C.T. Whitten, who had worked closely with Richards during his time at Crossroads, spoke candidly about the shock the church community felt. He revealed how caught off guard they were by the events that unfolded. We were totally caught off guard and shocked by what happened, Pastor Whitten said. The revelation that Richards was facing eviction had never come to light before the attack, and Whitten explained that had the church known, they would have stepped in to help. If we had known about the eviction, we would have helped, Whitten added, underlining the church's commitment to supporting its members through difficult times. At the time of the incident, Matthew Richards had been responsible for ministry work with young children, specifically handling the education and spiritual growth of children ranging from pre-kindergarten through 5th grade. 4 years, he had been a key figure in shaping the lives of young children within the church, guiding them through their faith. That brings us to the end of this case. A tragedy that raises so many difficult questions about how financial stress and hidden struggles can impact those closest to us. What are your thoughts on this story? Could things have been different if someone had noticed the signs earlier? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If this case left you reflecting, we have more stories on the channel that explore similarly heartbreaking events. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and share this video to help keep these stories alive. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.